In e-commerce, the ceiling is limitless. And that's why I think, we're able to have that $350,000 day, and we're able to just continue to grow this from 10 million to 20 million to 50 million.
Hey, welcome to the Amazing Freedom Amazon Seller Podcast. My name's Nate Slammons, joined by Andy Slammons. Hope you guys are doing well today. We're going live here to talk about our first $350,000 day on Amazon that happened last year, and still kind of blows my mind that we were able to do that. And so we're going to be talking about that today, what went into making that $350,000 sales day. What our reactions were to it, what the fallout was due to the $350,000 sales day, and just our follow up to that, and what we're planning in 2022 when it comes to inventory and logistics. So if you're watching this, I want to first direct you to amazingfreedom.com/insiders. That's where you can join us. Where going forward weekly, we're going to be sharing a weekly newsletter with our updates from our own brand, what's happening in the Amazon seller tribe with over $100 million Amazon sellers. We're going to be giving access to our community, and then also a look at some of the tools that Andy and I have been developing for our own brand that we're going to be giving out as part of that Amazing Freedom Insiders. So Andy and I own a portfolio of brands and services that does $15 million in annual sales. And a lot of people that we talked to over the past 8-9 years that we've sold on Amazon have failed when it comes to selling online. And we don't want you to be one of them. So we're trying to come out and talk about what we're doing, what's working in our business and what's not working. And we'll be talking about that today. So Andy, how are you doing? I know you're trying to get this set up, but how are you doing this week? I know it's always a little bit challenging to get a new year started. We have a lot of stuff going on in our brand and planning all that. What's the week been like for you starting off?
Yeah, no, it's going really well. The 2 weeks, during Christmas and before New Year's, like all workplaces, because you have those days where folks are off. And so you have the shortened work week. It's a little challenging, right? Although I think we did get a lot of stuff done during those 2 weeks. But then starting the year off, always excited. Building upon the previous 2 years, which for us in e-commerce, right, has just been magnificent, amazing. And, we're just hoping to continue to ride that wave. Exciting email that we received from a supplier that we work with here in the USA yesterday, that he has a number of new products that we're going to be bringing to Amazon. So that's very exciting as well, because if you're not adding new products to your inventory, then probably you're regressing or you're becoming stale, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. I was talking to someone else just this past week, and they were talking about how slow their workplace was. I'd be interested in our community and for Amazon sellers, the difference of the holidays and the end of the year. I think it's just entrepreneurs in general and small business, the difference compared to a major corporation or just a larger company, what the workplace is like during those off times. I imagine most people in our group that's hustling and selling on Amazon, it was busier than the average workplace, where a lot of those places you always hear traditionally after Thanksgiving are kind of close to the end of the year. We were definitely not like that. So exciting to get lots of stuff done and to look forward to this next year. So one of the challenges, but also a good thing, I think, this time of the year is always looking forward to planning out what the year is going to look like. We've been working with our team, working on our quarterly theme for this first quarter of 2022. We always want to look at like a 90-day period looking out to see what our focus is going to be for the next 3 months. I think that helps keep our team focused on our core objectives as it relates to our year. And so we're getting ready to do that. And this Friday, we'll be telling our team what kind of is all going to be our objectives this quarter. So excited about that. All right. Well, Andy, last year, or I guess, yeah, at some point last year, or within the last year, we had our first $350,000 sales day on Amazon, which was pretty exciting. before we get into the specifics of what happened and how, I just wanted to get your reaction when we first had that first day where we had a number of things going on that all kind of culminated in this massive sales day. And it definitely blew our expectations out of what we were going to do. What was your original reaction on that day when we were able to hit $350,000 in sales?
So, I mean, we've known other people. We have a good friend, right, who he sold $1 million in one day. We have been evangelists, right, that this e-commerce game is blowing up. Incredible opportunity. How Amazon has changed it by customers being able to order, get their product fulfilled in 2 days. So we've been pushing people in, saying, come join us. Look, and this is what we continue to do. Come join us. And when that day hit for me, Nate, it was like validation of everything that we've been saying for the past 8 years. Like there is just no better opportunity to build a business than there is on Amazon, when the fact that two guys who we started this brand. So at that point, I think we had been working on the brand for 16 to 18 months, sourced the product in Asia, got it into Amazon, selling decent. And then boom, we hit that $350,000 in one day. So, to me, it was kind of validation again. One of those moments where like, man, we're in the right business.
Yeah, I think that's the probably the thing we have to ask ourselves, like, was that a fluke or is this the right business and the opportunity? So, and we'll get into kind of what went into that. So it definitely wasn't, like you said, it takes 6 to 18 months of this brand that we were building. And so there was a lot of back end work that goes into a $100,000, $300,000 million day that we hope to get to at some point in our e-commerce careers for sure. So, how much of that was a fluke and how much of it was pre-planned work going into that, do you think, in your mind?
Yeah. So what's the phrase with luck? It's like hard work meets opportunity. And I think that we put a ton of hard work into this brand, into these products. And then when we hit that opportune moment, we were ready, right? And that's when it really exploded. And I think, for any business, there's an element to that, element of timing. There is obviously an element of hard work, but then you also have to have a high ceiling. So there's a lot of great businesses out there, but unfortunately the ceiling's not high. So we talk about this a lot, like a Subway business. The local Subway franchise, they're going to make probably between $500,000 and $600,000 a year in gross revenue. And that's about the ceiling of all they're going to make, right? Whereas for us in e-commerce, the ceiling is limitless. And that's why I think, we're able to have that $350,000 day, and we're able to just continue to grow this from 10 million to 20 million to 50 million.
Well, when you talk about a physical location or certain businesses, like you just talked about, there's only so many customers that you literally can get in the door on a single day. Like you could only service so many customers from a restaurant franchise, right? But that day, I actually haven't looked at the stats. I was just thinking that in my head as you were talking about it. I'll have to go back and look how many sessions we had during that time period as far as like customers on our landing page. But obviously it had to be tens of thousands of session landing pages just that one day alone in order to hit that $350,000 mark. So I think that really speaks to what you're saying there, that the ceiling has to be high. And with e-commerce, Amazon, you can potentially, in some brands do this, reach hundreds of thousands or millions of customers to their landing page in a single day.
Yeah. And this is what you and I have been preaching. And because of the internet, right, the scale, how massively you can scale, by the fact, again, that we had that one day, $350,000 worth of revenue. And then we're shipping and we're reaching customers literally all over the world. For us, it was primarily in the US, Canada, a little bit of Mexico. But the fact that here, I'm in Hershey, you're in Michigan, and we can send product in again that it's going to reach people all over. That's a high ceiling business. And the only bottlenecks for our business is the products, the amount of products that we can get into Amazon, and then the variety of products that we can get into Amazon. you and I know sellers, they sell $1 million every day, over $300 million a year. And they're able to do that because of scale and because of Amazon allows us to scale.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the fallout of some of those things that you said, the restrictions on how much inventory we have. I want to give a shout out to Patrick. I see Patrick and he had a question. He said, that's insane. He had a question saying, how much were your total sales on and off Amazon that day? So that day we hit 350 on Amazon, 350,000. I'm not sure the exact Shopify. I want to say it was around 20, 30,000 that day. But there was actually a period soon after that where we made some strategic decisions with our inventory due to eventually shortages that came from this growth in sales that we'll talk about, where we actually started to have a couple of Shopify days that were over $100,000 as well in a time period around there. So that was also exciting. Also see Motion, shout out to Motion saying amazing. Thanks guys for joining. If you have questions, drop them in the comments, or if you have feedback, or if you have any of your own personal record days that you've hit, whether that's 10,000, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, drop it in the comments. Would like to hear it. Definitely interested to see everybody's personal records. It's definitely a stepping stone process. And, Andy, just a couple of years ago, $1,000 days, $5,000 days, meant so much to us, right? And that was like exciting time period that was validating the success that you're talking about. And really, it's what makes it all possible, right? That progression through the years of going. We've talked about this all the time with our arbitrage businesses. We have so many friends and partners that still sell millions of dollars a year with arbitrage. Gary, who co-runs the Amazon Seller Tribe with Gay, just came out and showed that he did, I believe, around 2.3 million just in 2022, all online retail arbitrage. So that's how we started, and our sales days there were what got us to our recent sales days. And so at any level, we're excited. And like I said, the next goal kind of is that $1 million in a day sales mark. I think that's the next hurdle we're trying to get to, and excited for that. All right, Dan just dropped his on February 1st of 2021, a $142,000 sales day. So Dan actually, has a private label brand that he's pretty open about, and he's killing it with it. 142,000. And Dan, I don't know if this was the time period or not, but I know there was a period where Dan and his team ran out of FBA inventory, and they were literally shipping hundreds of units in a day, merchant fulfilled. And then they ran out of boxes, and they were they were bagging up products in like big trash bags to send into Amazon, which I didn't even know you could do. Or maybe they were sending them directly to customers. I can't remember. So they were, trash bagging them and sending them directly to customers. Yeah, in trash bags, Dan says. So that's kind of the, so Dan brings up our next topic I want to get on this $350,000 sales day, Andy, the fallout of selling that much. So Dan had the fallout from hitting that $140,000 sales day. The fallout was, one, their team was insane. I remember seeing some pictures and video that time. They were like, Dan was running around with his head, like a chicken with his head cut off. But they ran out of inventory eventually, of course. They ran out of supplies, boxes. They were shipping in trash bags. So walk me through some of the fallout, Andy, that we experienced with hitting that $350,000 day and big sales days kind of after that as well. What was some of the fallout you remember?
Yeah. So, a few things. Number one, I was thankful that we acquired a warehouse. So that's a huge piece, right? If you're going to be able to scale. Now, there are a number of sellers that send it directly into Amazon. We made strategic decision to acquire a large warehouse that we're able to store the inventory at. And, one of the negatives is your forecasting then gets totally thrown off. So in order to build an Amazon business, if you're in any type of retail and inventory-based business, you have to be good at forecasting. And so when you experience massive growth, like we did when we sold $350,000, the forecasting model that we had for our business then changed dramatically. And so, which is probably something we should talk about on the podcast today, because I think it's a failure I see often with folks in Amazon. They don't forecast properly. They either end up with way too much inventory, or they end up going out of stock and they don't have enough inventory. Whereas Companies like Dick's Sporting Goods, which is one of the only major retail chains left that deals specifically in sporting goods, they do well because they stay lean and mean, and they do an incredible job at forecasting. And a lot of these other sports stores that used to be around, they actually collapsed because they forecasted improperly. So I think after this day, Nate, is when you and I really started to get down to the nuts and bolts of forecasting and how we're going to do a better job at that.
Yeah. So we definitely changed our methods, how often we're forecasting. And I want to talk about that. A couple questions we had. Patrick asking all FBM or FBA as well. So on this specific day, almost all those products were FBA. We wouldn't have had the capacity to fulfill that much inventory that quickly. Well, we probably could have, but this particular products were FBA mostly. We did a lot of seller fulfilled right after that, actually, because we ran out of our FBA stock pretty quickly after some of these major days that we had. We do FBA and FBM in our business. What Andy was saying is our warehouse, typically we're sending containers to our warehouse first, storing the inventory there, and then dripping it into FBA as we need it, instead of sending containers directly to Amazon FBA like some sellers do. We have only done that a few times. Most of the time, we're storing the majority of our inventory in the warehouse space that we lease. So, Andy, I remember some of those days. First of all, it was an exciting time period, but it was also a very stressful time period. I remember thinking almost like, this isn't right. Like for some reason in my head, even though, like you said, we've been preaching it, it was like, man, is this possible? Could we really have sold this much? So it almost seemed like a little bit of a dream state there for a couple of weeks, like of trying to figure this all out. So I remember that. But then there was a lot of fallout. So we did go out. We started to realize that, hey, we're going to run out of stock on all of our product that for our major hero SKUs that were really going through this increased sales period. We had a lot of promotions going on. The demand had just increased due to seasonality. And there was a lot of factors that all went together. And like you just mentioned, our forecasting wasn't there. So we made some strategic inventory decisions that we had not done up until that point. And I want to challenge everybody listening when it comes to inventory challenges at time. Try to think out of the box. Think a little bit strategically. If the time period that you're in, you didn't plan for, you might need to operate a little bit differently than you would normally. So typically for this brand, we always import by boat because we have a little bit larger products, a little bit heavier. It just hasn't made sense to do air shipments for our products typically in the past. However, during this time period, we knew the demand was there. It was going to stay strong, and we were running out of stock. And so we were basically resolved to, man, this sucks. We're going to run out of stock and we're going to miss out on all these sales, until we had the idea to think outside the box. And I think Gary, actually, you were talking to Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think he's the one that sparked the idea for you to consider air shipment. Walk me through that process.
Yeah. So, we always say, look, surround yourself with people who think differently, who are great at business. We feel like that we've done a really good job so far at this. That's why we surround ourselves with people like Dan, you can see, who made a comment there in the chat. Others, Gary Ray, he's a partner of ours, Gabe Lisby. And so when you experience different things in your business, you really want to lean into others who may have ideas, right, that can help you. And so I was sharing with Gary kind of what we were going through, and he had a great idea. He said, well, hey, look, if the margins are there, why wait for a boat shipment? Why don't you run the numbers and see if it makes sense to ship these products by air? Now, these are larger products, right? And so we ran the numbers, and sure enough, it did. So we did a total shift from always doing boat shipments to now to try to get inventory in. We started air shipping them, right?
Yeah. And so I don't know why it didn't cross our mind, basically, but in the past, it always seemed not feasible to do air shipments for these larger products because it did take a margin hit, like we said. But when we knew the demand was proven, essentially, we already had these massive sales days, in that we didn't see that stopping in the short term. We told ourselves, look, we're one of the only sellers for this product in the marketplace. We knew there wasn't a lot of competition. That's why we had chosen the product in the first place. So again, we didn't see that declining. And so we were able to do air shipments. Now that did add, at the time, because I think shipping rates were just higher in general for the last 2 years now. The price per unit in our shipping went from about $8 per unit boat shipment to $40 to $50 air shipment. So that's why we had never done it, right? It's a 4 or 5 times increase there. And so our margins were already good, but we realized like, hey, we'll be able to raise our price somewhat in order to, for a good justifiable reason that we're paying more for our air shipping now. And so we were able to raise the price at that period in an amount that allowed our margins to stay similar while also getting the product in where we would have been waiting for 3 months otherwise. So I think we only stocked out for maybe a week. And I remember it's funny, we actually pre-sold some of that inventory as it was coming in as well at that point because we had been out of stock. Go ahead.
We'll talk about that. That was a strategic decision and something that we leaned into heavily over the next 3 to 4 months of pre-selling on our Shopify.
Yeah, and you have to be careful about this as an Amazon seller and Shopify in general, because even Shopify can frown on it if you don't do it right. But I think pre-selling is a strategic decision that people should be considering when it comes to their products. And so on Amazon, you can actually set the in stock date on your listing, right? And we've all seen this on Amazon listings where it will say in stock and it might be 3 weeks later, but you can still be making sales. A lot of times you won't have the buy box maybe necessarily, but people can order. So we did that for some of these products because we knew they were going to be coming. You can increase your handling time if you feel like you're going to have something, but you just want an extended handling time that's going to cover the out of stock. So the nice thing with the handling time is it won't show that in stock text on the listing that would potentially lower your conversion rate. It's just going to show a longer shipping time if you increase your handling time or increase your shipping time. So we did that. We put a handling time out, I think, for like a week and a half, and we had the air shipment coming, and we were able to sell thousands of dollars worth, tens of thousands. And I think during this time period, we're talking about where the demand was there, seasonally it was high, and we air shipped. We ordered, and I think we were getting 2,000 units in from a boat. This is later when we had a boat shipment. For the air shipments, we were pre-selling literally before they came. Now, what you need to be careful of course, with that is if you pre-sell something and there's an issue where it doesn't arrive like you thought it was going to, you can obviously be in big trouble, because on Amazon, if you have to cancel orders or have a late shipment, you could get your account suspended, or you could get your FBA privileges revoked if you're doing certain FBA type items. But in this case, it would be merchant fulfilled. That would be the issue. So that's a challenge. So you can get your merchant fulfilled shipping settings revoked if you aren't able to fulfill on time. And we actually had that happen to us on Canada one time, where our integration to our ship station got revoked, and we didn't realize we were missing Canada sales. We can talk about that another time, and how to avoid those type of back end integrations from, you always have to renew them. You always have to make sure they're working. So we can talk about that another time. So that was a scary time, because basically we were super nervous. We were pre-selling this inventory, and we kept telling ourselves, what if this doesn't get here in time? But we always try to be conservative when it comes to pre-selling and handling time. So we did this both on Amazon and Shopify, and it led to hundreds of $1,000s of pre-sales over the past 2 years that we've done when we've run into these logistical issues. Because I see Jay asking in the chat, hey, have you had any issues receiving product with the supply chain wreck? Yes, I think every single brand owner who imports from overseas, China, has, and we definitely have too. So these are some of the strategies we've done: is emergency air shipments, pre-selling in extended handling time when you have some best sellers that are out of stock, but you have to be conservative and careful. And then we've updated our forecasting models as well. And so to answer Jay's question, and what are we doing when it comes to our inventory shift, and this is what you were referencing earlier, Andy, we kind of have 3 things that we're looking at in 2022 that we've made this operational change due to the supply chain issues that we've experienced over the past year and a half. So number 1 is that we're forecasting our sales out 6 months. Now, in the past, we never forecasted out this long in a really strong way, right? We would kind of look maybe for a couple quarters what we thought would happen, but not at a specific level. Normally it was a broader level. Now we actually try to sit down and look at how many units we think we're going to sell per month for the next 6 months. Now, obviously that's challenging, and obviously you never truly know. And so you have to, really think about it. And of course, we do a couple practices. We look at our past historical data. So what did we do the past year? And do we think plus maybe 10% growth? If we think the brand has grown since there as well, we'll add something like that. We will look at competitor data. If we don't have that data ourselves, we'll see what have other brands done. Okay, what could we potentially expect when it comes to that? And then at some angle, we're just doing our best guesstimate when it comes to our monthly forecasting. And we're looking at that regularly. So that brings me to number two. Number one, we're looking out 6 months. Number two, we're meeting weekly with our team to do our forecasting. So in the past, Andy and I would typically meet every couple months in a way to kind of plan out our next couple months of inventory. But we realized that's just too long of a time period. So now we meet every single week on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. It's on the calendar. We meet with our finance and inventory managers and our Amazon account manager. And our finance and inventory manager, she has a spreadsheet that we've developed that we just look at our past data, the next 6 months. And every week we're looking at our sales for that week and basically trying to ask ourselves, do we need to change the forecasting, which every month we're updating what actually sold compared to what we thought was going to sell, and how does that impact our future sales? So we do that every week. It's not the most fun meeting. It's kind of painful. Andy normally compares it to going to the dentist when he's on that meeting. So not the most favorite meeting to attend, because it's a lot of data. It's a lot of looking at what do we think is going to happen with their sales. And so you can use software for this. We've tried some software out there like SoStocked, and Amazon even has their back end where they forecast how many units they think that you need. Amazon's forecasting has gotten a lot better, I would say, but it's still not, it doesn't consider all the factors, all the points like seasonality completely and everything. So you can't rely on it completely. And we tried SoStocked, but actually we just developed our own internal inventory spreadsheet forecasting and data that we just use now that we like the best. So we just manually do it with our inventory lead. She handles that. And so number one, we forecast 6 months out. Number two, we meet weekly. And then number three, when it comes to the supply chain and the cost of shipping itself, I know there's a lot of unknowns here, Andy, but I'm interested to hear your take on this. But basically, we're operating in 2022 as if shipping container prices is going to stay relatively similar to what we saw at the end of 2021, with an average shipping container price of around $12,000 to $15,000, if not more, for a 40-foot container. That's how we're operating. So, Andy, walk me through your process, why you think that's going to be the case for this year.
Well, so we don't know for a fact, but in talking to different people in the industry, talking to our freight forwarders, talking to folks in Asia who have, I think, probably a better understanding of on the ground what's happening there, they think that container prices are going to continue to stay inflated. So right now, prices are between 12 and 16,000 for a container, where if you go back probably 16 months, for us, we were paying $5,000 to get it to Baltimore, between $3,000 and $4,500 to get it to the West Coast, to Seattle. But we think, and again, this is kind of just our personal opinion, that container prices are going to continue to be between 12 and 15,000 over the next 12 to 18 months. And the primary reason that we're hearing, and those of you that are watching this, you can comment below and let us know what you're hearing. But the primary reason we're hearing is because a shortage of containers. So they're saying that all the containers are either in the US or in Europe. And for some reason, they're in transit. They're not making it back to Asia. And so, you're having these bidding wars for actual containers that are going to hold the product. And we think that's going to continue probably for the next 12 to 16 months, that those prices on containers are going to continue to stay inflated.
Yeah, so I want to say hi to Jay, Dan, Mary. Hey guys, thanks for joining us. And I want to hear if you're watching this or listening to this later, have you had supply chain issues? How has it impacted you? Again, I think everybody has, but specifically, what are you seeing? And what is your prediction? Do you think container prices are going to go down? They have gone down from the peaks at this point, but do you think they're going to continue down this year? Or do you think it's going to stay flat now like we are predicting for 2022, we think that it's going to stay inflated compared to what it used to be. And so I know I want to talk about a couple of things to wrap this up, Andy. What does that mean for us then when it comes down to how much inventory are we holding on hand? Like, what is the buffer stock that we want? Because a lot of companies got hit hard in 2020 from COVID when they didn't have enough stock on hand, right? For 20 years, all the rage was lean manufacturing, where you basically in just-in-time inventory, actually that's more relevant, just-in-time inventory, where you basically only have like 1 month's worth of inventory on hand because you're constantly getting it in. But that kind of broke in 2020. And so a lot of businesses started stocking up knowing that, hey, any natural disaster or pandemic can shut you down and your business grinds to a halt if you don't have inventory. So what does that mean this year? And what does it mean as far as container shipping versus LTL? Or, if container prices do go down and someone's already ordered, they paid kind of too much for that inventory in some ways, right? If they didn't need it yet, or if prices go up, it's like hedging your bets, right? So how much inventory do you want to hold? And what does that mean for sellers this year?
Yeah, so typical in business, you got to stay agile and mobile, like the Remember the Titans line in the football movie, because it's a whipsaw effect. So in the news a couple of months ago was Peloton. Peloton blew up during the pandemic, right? Because everyone was ordering exercise equipment. They were, exercising in their homes. They weren't going to gyms. Gyms are shutting down. And so Peloton, they kind of took their eye off of good business practice. They saw, the boom, and they just went way too deep, right? And so they started to order and purchase all this inventory. And then when things began to open up, consumers stopped buying as many exercise equipment from Peloton. And so their stock actually took a huge hit because sales dropped, they dropped dramatically. So as Amazon sellers, you really got to stay disciplined. I guess this is almost like, when it comes to investing, you don't want to get too crazy. So you want to stay disciplined. And for us, we always want to try to stay as lean and mean as possible. You want to try to keep, what we think is 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 weeks of inventory is the ideal. Now, when you import from Asia, that's often hard to do just because your supply chain is so much longer than if you're sourcing products domestically. But the ideal time, we think, is probably 6 to 8 weeks of inventory that you want to have at your warehouse. If you have a retail store, that's for sure the max. I mean, you can see Walmart, they have very small back of a store warehousing space. They basically want to, get stuff shipped and they want to put it on the shelves right away. Like as a business, that's how you want to run. You want to run as lean and mean as possible. And so that's the goal, right, Nate? 6 to 8 weeks. Would you say that?
Yeah, but we've seen the fallout. A lot of Walmarts the past year have had empty shelves for certain products, right? And it's because of that model of how lean they stay. And so they're missing out on sales opportunities. But like you said, if you go too aggressive, you have the Peloton effect, and your business could get crippled from having too much inventory. So I think it comes down to what Gary Ray always talks about in his coaching: fear versus greed. At some point in your business, you have to look at your cash flow. You have to say, would I rather miss out on some sales by not ordering enough, or would I be devastated if I ordered too much inventory and then my cash flow dried up and I couldn't do anything, right? That whole fear versus greed, you have to look at that. And so something that we're doing is, number one, we do have more than 6 to 8 weeks of inventory on hand. We actually have more, typically, because of everything craziness, looking more like a 3-month buffer. So like 12 to 15 weeks. And as we head into Chinese New Year coming up here soon, as the time of us recording this, we actually, for some of our products, have more like 4 months plus, because we know that the factory is going to be shut down for a month and a half in some cases, or they're not producing. So we are kind of product heavy at times now, more than we would like to have been in the past. But I think that's just the nature of the supply chain environment that we're in. And thankfully, we have the cash flow ability or cash on hand to do that, where a lot of sellers can't. And so they might have to operate more lean, and they might have to do LTL shipments instead of full container, just to make sure that they don't run out of cash. Jay asked a question: at $12,000 a container or $15,000 a container, isn't it cheaper just to get products made in the US at this point? Well, I think that's kind of the idea, that this maybe could eventually bring more US manufacturing back. We actually do have some US manufacturing for some of our products we source domestically. I know Dan, who's on this chat or was earlier, he has some domestic manufacturing done. So I think it's becoming more of a possibility for some products. However, for 90+% of niches, I think it's still going to be China-based manufacturing for the foreseeable couple of years, because the US just doesn't have the infrastructure, doesn't have the manufacturers, doesn't have the capability, and it's just harder to work with US manufacturers typically than China. And even with the increased shipping, the labor costs are still just so much higher in the US on average that it makes it tough. So I still don't think we're at the point where we can say, even with tariffs, even with increased shipping, that, hey, everything should move back to US. I think it's going to be a slower transition. And we talked about that it's hard to make a quick shift from a global manufacturing country like China to the US overnight. It's going to take time, but I do think it'll have fallout over years, where it'll go to Taiwan, India, US, other places, right? So that's something to be keeping a close eye on for us. So yeah, Andy, so we're looking at trying to get less inventory if we can on hand, stay lean, but that's been a challenge. So we have more right now than we typically used to. And so with us, our personal opinion, thinking that container prices are going to stay the same, we're basically operating as if that's the case. And so we're not trying to basically to put too much decision making into, well, if prices drop, this would happen. If prices rise, this will happen. One thing we have done that I think everybody needs to consider if you're selling your own branded products is, with the just increased risk with everything going on with supply chain, inventory, cost in general, we've seen our margin shrink the last few months, right? Due to those increase in shipping. I think most people have. And so now we're asking ourselves, okay, if we still need to hold inventory on hand, or if we don't want to hold too much inventory on hand, when do we increase prices? And so this year, we're really spending a lot of time looking at our pricing. It's tough to make pricing decisions if the competition isn't, but we're asking ourselves, would we rather sell the same volume or even a lower volume at a higher price point to reduce the risk of getting too much inventory on hand? And I think that's what we're looking at. And so just your thoughts on that as we wrap up, Andy. What would your pricing decision be? And what do you think inflation and cost is going to do to the pricing across the board with products this year?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's yet to be seen what sellers are going to do, what, the retail industry is going to do. Part of the shortages in Walmart were some businesses, some manufacturers were actually choosing not to ship their products to Walmart because Walmart would not increase the price. So, think about some bigger products, bigger brands who are manufacturing in China. They have these contracts with Walmart that they're going to sell them a widget for 50 cents a piece. And now their shipping prices increase, 400 times. And Walmart has them locked in at that price. And so that manufacturer is going to lose money if they ship those products to Walmart. So some of them were making the decision like, hey, look, you know what? We're not even going to ship. We're backing out of this contract because that's too much money that we're going to lose if we ship it. So, some people, some companies might make a decision like that. They might go out of business, right? Whereas, for us, I think what we're starting to do is we're just starting to inch our prices up and then kind of measure that and see if our sales velocity drops dramatically, while at the same time trying to see what other companies in our niche are doing and where their prices are at. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that you have to weigh when it comes to adjusting your price.
Yeah, so definitely it's such a it depends type of scenario and question and answer. However, we're basically telling ourselves, when it comes to the risk of shipping costs, supply chain issues, holding inventory, we're trying to not be too greedy. Like you said, take a step back, evaluate it, and say, would we be okay? If our margins are going down, how do we get back to the margins that we think allow us to put all the marketing dollars we want to have healthy margins grow in the future, by maybe taking a step back, slowing down, raising prices a little bit, even if that means we'll sell some less units, but it's kind of the more conservative approach, honestly, to raise your prices if you can, is the conservative approach, because you are saying, I'd rather have really healthy business financials instead of pure revenue, right? So it's kind of this thing where everybody hates seeing their revenue decrease. Like, you always want to be growing your revenue. All companies like to see, the bigger the better in some ways. But you will hear a lot of people say, hey, would you rather be a $100 million company at a 5% margin, or a $50 million company at a 10% margin? Well, there's a lot less headache a lot of times with that $50 million company, or just keep scaling that back, right? Or $25 million company at a 20% margin, or a $12 million company at a 50% margin, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into size growth, having more employees to manage, all that might not be worth the headache. And so we're asking ourselves that, can we increase prices? Can we slow down a little bit volume wise in order to make sure our margins are healthy? And so I would challenge everybody to consider that with their own brands, what that means with the supply chain crisis, and obviously factoring all that as it relates to your own niche.
Hey, I see some people that are just joining us here. So if you just join us, what we're talking about is when we had our first $350,000 day on Amazon, and how for us, it really validated what we've been sharing over the last 8 years about this incredible opportunity of selling on Amazon. What we've often said is, if you're going to go into business that is going to have a high ceiling. What does that mean? Go into a business that you could reach potentially $1 billion in sales. Well, what kind of business is that? Well, a location independent or a location-based business, you are going to have a ceiling of how many people, of what your gross revenue is going to be, because it's all based on locality. What's amazing about selling on Amazon, and why this $350,000 day really geeked us up about selling, is because of this device right here that is in 99% of our customers across the world. In the US, they can order our product on Amazon any time of the day, right? And because of that, Amazon-based businesses have an extremely high ceiling. I'll give you a brand to look at. It's called Anchor. So they make batteries, right, that help charge phones. Now they're branching out and making a lot of different products. They are a multi-billion-dollar brand, and it was all built on the Amazon.com platform. So that's what's exciting, again, about a $350,000 day. It's not that day, that it was fun, but it's also the proof of concept that, man, we could potentially build $1 billion brand, right, Nate?
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to keep talking about this every week, get more into specifics of what we did when it comes to product selection, how we choose these products that create $350,000 in sales, how we're growing our brand week to week. And as we head into 2022, we'll be monitoring the supply chain crisis or issue, whatever you want to challenge, whatever you want to call it, very closely. We'll try to give updates, what we're doing in our brand, how we're launching new products when it comes to other marketplaces like Europe or other places, the challenges that come into that, trying to start in a new marketplace when shipping costs are high. So we're experiencing that challenge, those decisions in our own business. And it is hard, but the opportunity is there. And sometimes these types of challenges weed out the small players, the inefficient players, the players who aren't using good timeless business principles. So we're going to do our best to continue that and share what we're doing, hopefully on a consistent manner, week to week, and what we think is good advice here. So if you haven't yet, go to amazingfreedom.com, sign up to be an Amazing Freedom Insider, where you'll get notified of more content that we will have, more specifics, some data stuff that we'll be pulling together for trending niches and stuff that we see being helpful.